Hey, what's going on guys? Tanmay here for Simple Snippets and welcome back to another video tutorial on dynamic web application development using ASP.NET with C# programming and MS SQL as the database. And in today's video, as the title of the video suggests, we are going to develop one more admin module, which is going to be a very important module for the e-library management system, that is book issuing module. So before we start off, if you're new on this channel, if this is the very first video, we've been developing this entire e-library management system and this is the entire playlist. So if you've missed any of the tutorials, I'll drop the link of this playlist in the video description. Do check it out. Follow this entire playlist from the start because otherwise you'll miss out on some important lessons that we've learned so far, because we're going to use a lot of those concepts over here also. And as you can see on the screen, I have loaded our home page. Let's log in as admin because this is the admin module. We've already done the login and everything else. So we are pretty much coming to the end of this entire course. Last few tutorials left, and later on we'll add some enhancement as well. And this is the book issuing module that we are talking about. If I click on it right now, we've already designed the user interface and I've changed this go button to gray. Otherwise everything else is designed, but right now nothing is working. So what is this book issuing module? Now, as the name suggests, whenever you want to take a book from the library, you go to the library, the librarian will mention the start date and end date for that particular book and will give you a card. But this is a digital process, right? So when you go to this library, the librarian will do the same process digitally. So the librarian will take your member ID, will take the book ID, then your member name and book name will automatically pop up when you click on the go button. The librarian will set the start date and end date depending upon what the rules are. We are going to assume that in this library management system, you can take one book for 7 days. Okay, so that's the logic we are going to implement, but that can be different according to your needs. So the start date and end date will be set and the librarian will issue that book to you. Okay, so this is that module that is going to do that. So let's assume that we have a particular book and we have 10 copies in our library. So whenever I issue a book, whenever the librarian issues the book to a member, from the current stock, that one book will be reduced to 9. The actual stock obviously will remain the same, but current stock will go down. So when you click on issue, the current stock should be reduced by 1. So all those logic we are going to write in this tutorial. Now similar to that, we have the return book. So whenever 7 days pass, depending upon whether the member comes on the 7th day or comes before, he or she will come back with the book and return it. And then you have to do the same thing. You'll type in the member ID, book ID, and you'll say return. And when you click on return, that book will be incremented, so the current stock will increase in the database and that entry will be erased. Okay, now let's assume that a member does not return a book in 7 days, so he or she will be added to the defaulters list, and whenever the admin or librarian will see that record, it will be shown in a red mark onto the screen. So just to give you an example of our demo, let's go to the demo website and see how things work. So this is how the demo interface would look like, and you can see there are 2 red marks because I've already added 2 books. So a member named Tanmay Sakpal has issued a book on this date. This is 19th/9/2019 and the due date was 26/9/2019. So we are way past that, and that's why these 2 columns or these 2 rows have become red, which means that Tanmay Sakpal is in defaulters list, and now the admin or the librarian can decide to not issue any more books or charge him some fine depending upon what rules you have. And this is how the user interface would look like. So let's actually quickly get started with the development, and a lot of things are going to be coming in from whatever we've learned throughout this course. So coming to our page, let's go to the coding part. If you're new to my channel, my name is Tanmay Sakpal and I do a lot of computer science and information technology video tutorials like computer programming, development, technology talks, and a lot more on this channel. So if that's something you're interested into, then definitely subscribe and turn on the notifications to get the latest updates and never miss out on such important topics. So in the coding part, just scroll up. We are going to develop the book issuing module over here in the design. If you see, I've made this button black. That's because I've changed its class to btn-dark. When I change it to btn-primary, I don't know why the button doesn't completely show up. So just to show you, if I do it btn primary, it will give it a blue look, but the button will not show up properly. It's some design flaw. If you see over here now, this button is going half cut over here. So hence I've made it btn dark. So there's a different class in Bootstrap. Anyways, first things first, what we will do is we will go to the design. We've already added the grid view, but it is not linked to any database. So go to the source. Let's add a data source. So go to the data part. We need a SQL data source. Now we've already done all these steps before, but I'm redoing it for you guys. Click on this icon, configure data source. We already have the eLibrary connection string. Next, let's just open the database as well. I'll just connect the database, go to our databases. In the eLibrary DB, in the tables, we are now dealing with the book issue table. Okay, so if I select right now, we'll get all the columns, but we don't have any rows inside because we've not issued any books. So we're getting a blank table. Anyways, coming back to the configuration, we are dealing with book issue table and we are firing a select star from query. We're going to select all the values, hit next, test query. You can see blank data is coming in, but something is coming in. So finish, everything is working fine. Lastly, in this grid view, in the properties, if you just select this and you have to go into the choose data source, select SQL Data Source 1, all the columns will come in by default. In the design now, you can see all the columns are coming in from the table. You can edit them. So go to the edit columns. Let's give them proper headers. So this is member ID. Hit enter. This is member name. So we'll give it member space name. This is book ID. So book ID, book name. This is issue date. And this is due date. Okay, so things look nice now. Click OK. All the headings are changed. The data source is set. What do we have next? Let's refresh. Nothing will happen because data will still not come over here because there is nothing there in the table. So the next thing that we can do now is we'll take the member ID and we'll take the book ID, and when we click on go, we'll get the member name and we'll get the book name individually using the member ID and book IDs, because you can see this is not editable. This has to come from the database. And then we'll do issue book. Okay, so when we click on issue book, by setting the start date and end date, all these entries, member ID, book ID, member name, book name, start date and end date, will be stored in the book issuing module or book issuing table, and that will be shown in the grid view. So let's first add functionality to this go button. So come to it, click on the go button, double click on it. So you can see go button click event fired. And similarly, I've already created issue book and return book click events. So go on to it, double click on it. So this is the issue book. Go over here, double click. This is the return book. So right now we are adding functionality to the go button. So let's create custom functions, our user defined functions, like what we've been doing so far. By now, if you've been typing all the code throughout this course, I'm assuming you guys must be expert in database connectivity at least. So let's copy paste some code from other pages. Let's go to the admin author management. We've already done that. The first thing that we need when we want to perform database connectivity is this strcon, which is taking the connection string from the web.config file. So coming to the book issuing page in the backend code, the first thing over here at the class level is this strcon, which is coming from the configuration manager, and obviously it is going to throw some errors because we need those namespaces also. So using system.configuration, I'm assuming you guys already know what is connection strings, what is web.config file. We've already talked about it in detail. The next thing that we need is these SQL namespaces. So I'm going to hit enter and paste them over here. System.configuration, system.data, system.data.sql client. Okay. So first thing that we have to do is when I type in the member ID and book ID, from the member ID, I need the member name. From the book ID, I need the book name. So these are two individual select queries that we have to fire when we click on button go. So let's do that. Let's do the coding for select query. We've already done that. So in the user defined function, I'm going to say void get book and member names, or whatever you want to call it. In fact, let's just keep it simple, get names, because using the member ID we are getting the member name, and using the book ID we are getting the book name. Inside this, obviously we have to fire a SQL query, fire two SQL queries basically. So let's start with the try catch block, because SQL connection database connectivity should be kept in try catch. Sometimes we get unwanted errors. So the try catch block is done. Now we need to start with the SQL connection. We need to connect with the database using this connection string. So I'm going a little slow because we've caught a lot of speed, and maybe you might have forgotten because you're probably using the same code that I've directly shared to you on the website. So let's do it a little slowly this time. Let's do the connectivity from the scratch. So first things first, create a connection object using the strcon string, open the connection. Alright. Next thing, create the command. So this is the command object using SQL command. We are saying select book underscore name. So what do we have in the tables? We need the book name from the book master table, right? So if I click on select top 1000 rows, we need book underscore name from bookmaster TBL and not table. So make sure you use proper column names and proper table names. So select book name from bookmaster table, where book ID, do we have this? Yeah, we have book ID, which is coming from text box 1. Now if you see admin book issuing, this is text box 1 and member ID is text box 2. Okay, so book ID text box is text box 1. Alright, so once we type in the command, this is the command, select book name from bookmaster where book ID is equal to text box 1. We are only interested in book name, that's why we don't do select star from. Next thing is you create a SQL data adapter DA, you pass in the command, you create a data table and then you say DA.fill. Inside that you say DT. Okay, so whatever book name will come, so whenever you type in the book ID in the text box 1, and when you click on go, this ID will be taken. If it's a legit ID, the value will come and it will populate this book name text box, right? So we have to take it in this DT table. So here we can simply say if dt.rows.count is greater than 1, that means you've entered a right ID. If it is greater than equal to 1, so we'll say text box 4.text. Let's see if it is text box 4. What is book name? Yeah, book name is text box 4. It is read only. And we'll say text box 4.text is equal to dt.rows.zeroth row and the book name column. We are anyways getting only one column, so if we say 0 and 0 over here, it won't matter. But we are specifying book name and we'll say .toString. And in the else part, if we don't get any rows, we will say wrong book ID. Okay, seems easy. Now just like this, we need to fire one more SQL query, but this time we'll select member name from member master table. That's the only difference. So we can completely reuse all these objects, CMD object, DT object, DA object. We don't have to recreate new ones. So I'm gonna just copy this and you can see I have just said CMD is equal to now select full name from member master table. Let's see if we have this same table name. So in the member master table, if I say select top 1000 rows, what do we have? The name of this table is member master table, which is correct. Do we have full name? Yes, we have full underscore name. So this query is right, where member ID is coming from text box 2, right? So do we have member ID? Yeah, we have member underscore ID. That is right. If we go into the front end, the member ID text box is text box 2 and not text box 6. So I've changed it to text box 6. Everything else is exactly the same. We again recreate this DA, that is reinitialize it, is equal to new data adapter. This time this CMD is passed, which is having a new query. We again refill the DT table. We say DT is equal to new data table. So recreate it, reinitialize it, and now fill it with new column, which is the full name from member master table. Again, we check if we get an entry or not. If we get, we print it to text box 3. Do we have text box 3? Yeah, we have text box 3. In the else part, we say wrong user ID. So this is pretty fair. This is pretty basic enough. So when you click on go, we simply have to call get names. Let's refresh our code and let's see if things work. Okay, I clicked that button. That's why it is giving me an output already. Let's put in member ID. Let's see what IDs we have first in the database. We have member ID TS11. Let's say what book IDs do we have. We have things like B001. So we'll do B001. Now if I click on go, there you go. You can see I've got Tanmay Sakpal as the member name, which is correct. Tanmay Sakpal is corresponding to TS11 and the book name B001 has the power of your subconscious mind. So everything is working perfectly fine. If I put B002, click go. Now I'm getting How to Win Friends, which is the second book. Alright. Now we fix the start date. Now I've not added any validations over here. You can do some validations wherein like you can restrict the user to enter a previous date from the current date and whatnot. Right now we'll keep it as it is. We can add the enhancements in the later on tutorials. So I'll say 22 December, which is today's date. Let's enter 7 days from now is the end date or due date basically. And now we want to issue this book. So on issue, we have to do certain checks. And those certain checks are, firstly, we'll have to check in the inventory in the book master table whether the current stock of this book is not less than 0, right? So that is the first thing that you have to check. The next thing that you have to do is you also have to check if these two things exist in the database or not. That is a member ID with this TS11 and a book ID with this B002. Does these two things exist or not? So that is two important validations that you have to check, and if those are satisfied, only then you have to add an entry into the book issuing table with all these values, right? So let's try to write the code for issuing books. So come to the front end, double click on this. This is where the book issuing happens. Come to the user defined function part. Let's first write a function which will check if the particular member exists and check if that particular book exists. Let's create a function. We'll say bool check if book exists. Now, as the name of the function suggests, we have to check in the book master table if the book exists and if that book has a current stock which is greater than 0. So two checks we have to do. So there is an AND clause in between, and you can see this is a boolean data type, return type, so it will either return true or false. So let's start off with try catch. It's showing an error because we have not returned anything, so I'll just write return false just for the error's purpose. Now the error is gone. So in the try, and we also have a catch. So in the try, again we have to do the database connectivity. So I'm just literally gonna copy all this code over here and paste it. So this is basically pretty much gonna be the same thing, just that in the if else we have to either return true or false. Okay, so the connection is made over here, connection is open. What would be the query? We will say select star from book master table where book ID is coming from text box 1. So this is pretty much legit. Now if we get a book, if we get a row count of 1 or greater than 1, it would be basically 1 only, because book IDs are unique, right? So over here I'm gonna say return true. Now one thing to remember, as I mentioned, is it is not a simple select query. So you have to say select star from book master table where book ID is equal to text box 1, but there is also and in the and clause what we have is we have to say current stock greater than 1. So it has to be current stock which is greater than 0, not greater than 1, it has to be greater than 0. So this is that and clause, okay? And now if we get a row, it would mean that there exists one book in the database with this particular ID that is entered in the text box, and it also has a current stock which is greater than 0, okay? And in the else part, obviously we have to pass in false. In the catch, again we have to say return false, okay? So there's that. So check if book exists is pretty much done. Similarly, we have to do check if member exists, right? So I'm gonna say check if member exists. Over here the query is gonna be this one, and everything else is gonna be the same, which is select full name from member master table where member ID is coming from text box 2. Everything else is gonna be the same, right? So fair enough, we created two functions. We said check if member exists, we are creating check if book exists. Now after these two things happen, so when you issue the book, the first thing that we have to do is we have to say check if book exists, and we can say and check if member exists. So we are doing a composite condition. We are saying if the book exists and if the member exists, only then you have to do the if block. In the else part, we can simply print invalid member or book details, right? So let's copy some response code, come over here and paste it and say wrong book ID or member ID. Now inside this is where you have to insert, that is, once you enter all the valid details, when you click on issue book, all these values, that is member ID, book ID, member name, book name, start date and end date, those will be stored into the book issuing table. So if you see the design or the columns, we have member ID, member name, book ID, book name, issue date and due date. 6 values which are coming from these 6 text boxes. So now let's create one more function, which is one more user defined function. We will say void. Now we have to write an insert query. Let's copy the insert query from some other code that we've already written. Okay, so I'll just copy this add new author code. We create the connection, open the connection. Now it is an insert query. So insert into, now this time it is book issuing table, right? So book issue table is the table name. Things to enter are, the columns are basically member ID. Then we have member name. We have book ID and book name. Then we have issue date and due date. 3 simple textual values it shouldn't be a hassle. So again, member ID, member name, comma @book ID, comma @book name, comma issue date. Okay, it's @issue date, comma @due date. Okay, let's change the text over here also of end date to due date, so that everything is uniform. We'll duplicate these values a few more times, 6 times to be precise. So member ID is coming from text box 2, member name is coming from text box 3. We have book ID, which is coming from where? Text box 1. We have book name, right? So book name is coming from text box 4. We have issue date and we have due date. Issue date is the start date basically, so let's change that also. This is issue date. It is coming from text box 5 and due date is coming from text box 6. So issue date coming from text box 5, due date coming from text box 6. Okay, so things are pretty much done. Here we will say book issued successfully. Now remember, as I mentioned, when you issue a book to a particular member, the current stock of that book reduces by 1 count. So that also has to be done, right? So there is an update query that you need to fire in the member master table to reduce the count of that particular book that you just issued. Now we already have the ID of the book, so we can directly fire the update query over here also. So let's do that. So right after you execute the first query over here, which is adding this book issue values into the book issuing table, what you can do is you can again write a new command or new query using the same command object. You say cmd is equal to new SQL command. Here you say update book master table. So it's TBL, right? Yeah, it is book master TBL and not table. Make sure you don't make any typing mistakes. So you say update book master table set current stock. So we have current underscore stock is equal to current stock minus 1. And you say where book ID is equal to coming from text box 1. So you reduce that. You again say cmd.execute non-query. So you are firing 2 queries over here, but both the queries are different. You're using the same object, but you're changing the query. And then you say con.close, you can close the connection, you say book issued successfully. So this is one extra line of code that you have to do when you issue the book. So let's see if this works. Let's actually refresh. Let's save this and refresh the browser and let's see if things work. Okay, so I'm gonna issue TS11 with B002. Let's change this to 22 and this has to be 29. Let's click on issue book and we should get an entry over here, because once you click on issue book, what we are doing is, okay, we are not calling that function over here. I always forget this. Just copy this and paste it over here. So when you call issue book, at the last we are saying gridview1.data bind, which means the gridview will refresh and gridview is linked with the data source. Right, so our grid view is linked with this data source. This data source is firing a select query. Remember, in the source, if you can see, we are saying select star from book issuing table. And when we click on issue, we are adding 1 entry into the book issuing table. So that will be refreshed and we should see some value, that is 1 row over here in the grid view. So let's click on issue. Okay, it's saying wrong book ID or member ID. Why is it saying wrong book ID or member ID? Let's go to the code and see. Okay, so I figured out the error and it was in our query. So when you say check if book exists in the query, select star from book master table where book ID equals to coming from text box 1, we are missing out a single quote over here, and that's literally what was happening. We are just missing out on this one single quote. Everything else is fine. So I'm guessing things should work now. Let's refresh our code and let's see if things work. So it's still not working. That's because we have to erase out this single quote. So you can see how small single quotes can cause so much issue. You don't even actually get the issue at times. So make sure you type out the query very properly. Don't make any typing mistakes in the query. A lot of times beginners make this mistake. In fact, even I make it a lot of times. So now if I refresh, things should work. Okay, so there you go. You can see book issued successfully. When I click on OK, we are getting this one single entry also. That TS11, a member has this book ID and it is from 22 to 29. Now this grid view is not enabled or search enabled, so let's make it search enabled. You know what to do. Go to the code. On the top over here we have to type in a little bit of script which is for data tables, so that you can get it from anywhere. This is that script. Paste it. We don't need this function because that's for that image thing. So yeah, this is that script which is using data tables library. Now if I refresh our code, our grid view should be enabled. Okay, we mistakenly did multiple entries. So we also have to check for that, because one person cannot issue one book multiple times, right? So now that we've recognized this flaw, let's actually go ahead and correct it. Also remember that now that it is issued 2 times, in the stock it should be 2 less than the actual stock, right? The current stock should be 2 less than the actual stock for B002. So let's go on view books, and for B002, if you see actual stock is 10 but now the current stock has become 8. So that code is also working perfectly fine. Okay, so this is firing multiple times. It shouldn't do that. So now let's write some code which will restrict one member to take one book only one time. So TS11, that is Tanmay Sakpal, cannot get how to win your friends and influence people one more time, right? So these two entries should not happen. So in the code, in the check if book exists, I can also copy this and paste it one more time. In fact, let's copy paste this because this is an easier one. So I'm gonna copy this and paste it over here, and I'm gonna say check if issue entry exists. Okay, and in this check what we'll do is we'll say select star from, and this time we'll say book issuing table. So we'll say book issue table, select star from book issue table, where we will say member ID is coming from text box 2, and we'll say, and we'll just copy the book ID code. We will say book ID is coming from text box 1. So if you get such entry, then also you will not allow to issue that book. So inside this we can create one more if else. We will say if check if issue entry exists, and if it does, then what we will say, this member already has this book. And in the else part, we will now issue the book, because that's when that entry will not exist, right? Let's actually delete from book issuing table. It has to be delete from and not delete star from. If I execute, yeah, 2 rows are deleted. Also, let's go to the book master table. Over here, we've reduced the quantity of current stock. Let's reinstate it to 10 because we have to manually do it right now because we haven't written the code for the return book. So when you return the book, you will automatically increment that current stock. Right now, we've not written the code as of now. We'll do it in a few minutes, but let's first go ahead and refresh our page. And now the book is issued successfully. We are seeing one entry because the previous 2 are deleted. Now if I try to issue it again, now I'm getting a message, this member already has this book. So a new entry is not made. Okay. So there you go. The issue book is pretty much done. Now we can obviously search if you have multiple records, if you have multiple members having multiple books. So this module will help, and this search enable feature will help a lot over here, because obviously a library will have multiple members taking in multiple books, and that limit can also be set by you. For example, if you want to allow one member to take only 5 books at a time, you can do that check also using the code, right? So you can say select count star from this book issuing table where member ID is this and book ID is this, and if that count exceeds 5, you can pop up a message saying that this member has already taken 5 books, you cannot issue one more book. So I hope you're getting, we can do all this in enhancements part later on, but right now let's actually write the code for return book also. So return book is nothing but deletion of this entry and addition of 1 to the current stock. That's the only thing that you have to do in return. So when you return, you have to clear this record, right? Because this is a temporary table basically just to see which member has taken which book. And this is for the librarian, this is the admin module. So when I click on return, obviously I'll again need the member ID and book ID. So I'll say delete star from this table where member ID is this and book ID is this. And I'll also say increment the current stock of that book which is having this ID. So these are the only two things that we have to do on this return click event. So let's quickly do that. coming to the code on the front end side, double click over here. So over here also, first obviously we'll have to check if book exists, check if member exists, and again we'll also have to check if the entry also exists. So I'm just literally gonna copy this and paste it over here. So we'll check if book exists, check if member exists, check if issue entry exists, and over here is where we have to see the return book. Okay, so I'm gonna say return book. We still have to create this function, so it will right now throw us an error, and in this response we can show some other error saying this entry does not exist. Let's create this user defined return book function. Just like issue book, we have return book. Okay, as I mentioned, in return book we simply have to delete that record and we have to add one count to the current stock of one particular book that we are taking back from the member. Okay, so this I'm literally gonna copy paste things. It is gonna be simple. Open the connection, con.open, create the command. We'll say delete from book issue table, which is this table. We will say where book ID equals to coming from text box 1, because book ID is coming from text box 1 and member ID is coming from text box 2. So we'll say and member ID coming from text box 2 and not 6. We'll execute this, and remember, whenever you use this cmd.execute non-query, it returns a value depending upon whether that query executed or not. So we want to know whether this query executed and affected the rows or not, and if it affects any of the rows, it will return the number of rows affected. So if one row got deleted, that is using this delete query, you will get result as 1, and that result is stored in this integer variable. So this is something that you're seeing for the first time, so that's why I'm trying to explain. So this result will hold the number of rows affected, and if it is greater than 0, it will mean that one row is deleted, right? So that's why we are saying if result is greater than 0, it means that that entry existed and we deleted it. So now we can again open the connection. It's actually already open, we don't need this. Now we are again saying cmd is equal to update book master table. It has to be tbl, right? Yeah, it is book master tbl. I sometimes mess up the naming conventions. Whatever you follow, make sure you be uniform through it. We say update book master table, set current stock is equal to current stock plus 1, where book ID is again coming from text box 1. Okay, we again say execute non-query, close it, and we say book returned successfully. That's about it. This is the code for return book. Come over here on the top. This is where we've called return book. Let's save this and let's refresh the code. Let's try to return this one entry itself. Okay, and now if I click on return this entry, let's first actually view the books and let's see if this book ID with B002 has one entry less, because it is given out to a member, right? So if I go to the view books, over here you can see actual stock is 10 and available stock is 9. If I come back and now if I return this book, it has to be, okay, it's throwing an error. Why is it throwing an error? It's saying this entry does not exist. Let's see what we've done as a mistake. It's showing this entry does not exist, which means we already deleted it. Okay, so we've deleted it, but it did not give us a message. Let's see if in the book master table do we have, okay, so current stock did not got incremented by 1. So let's see where the issue exists. Go to definition. That issue should exist somewhere over here, because this delete query got fired, right? You can see from the database we do not have a record over here, but this current stock did not got updated, which means the error is coming somewhere over here. And you can see I have left out 2 spaces over here in the query. It is probably because of this. I'm gonna erase 1 space, and that's why this typing out this query is very delicate. Update book master tbl. The book ID is coming from text box 1. Let me just verify. It's verified. Save this and let's see if things work now. They should work. Let's first edit and make it 10 and 10. It's already done. Okay, so let's see. We have 9 values over here. So we have to edit and change the current stock value to 10 first. Okay, so that's done. Let's go to view books. So you can see actual stock and available stock is perfect. Come back. Now let's say TS11 B002 issue date, due date. Why is this still, okay, we did not say gridview 1 dot data bind, right? Did we say it in return book also? Yeah, this did not get executed at all. Let's call the gridview 1 dot data bind on a load event also. Now let's refresh. We should not see any entry over here. We've deleted all. Yeah, you can see we are not seeing any entry. Let's issue this book first. Book issued successfully. 1 entry done. In the view books, available stock is reduced by 1. Come back. We will still have 1 entry. We are using the same member ID, same book ID, and now let's click on return. Okay, it's still showing. It's not giving us a pop-up of book returned successfully. However, if I refresh, that book is deleted from the table, which means return book is working fine till an extent. That is, some part is working fine. Okay. So con.close should not come over here. It should come over here. The connection we are explicitly closing, right? But we are still firing one more query. And hence that issue is coming. So the second query is not being fired. So again, I'll have to re-edit things over here. Make it 10. Okay. This is done. Come back to the code. Go to view books. Let's refresh the code actually. Let's go to admin login. TS11 123. We logged in as a admin. Go to the book issuing module. TS1112 or book ID is B001. If I click on go, I get the member name and book name. Let's issue this book 22 and 29. When I click on issue, book issued successfully. We've got this first entry. Now let's click on return. We are returning this same book, that is, this member is coming back and giving back this book. Before that, let's go to view books. Okay, so we said B001, so available stock of B001 is reduced by 1. Actual stock is 30. Again, coming to the book issuing module. Now, TS11, book is B001. Click on go. You don't have to actually click on go over here when you want to return the book. When I click on return, we are simply going to delete this entry and add 1 to the current stock of this book. When I click on return, there you go, book returned successfully, which means now when I click on view books, there you go, the actual stock and available stock is now matching up. So yeah, this is pretty much done. And one last thing that is left is to make the grid view row red when a user particularly crosses the defaulters list. So let's add an entry again. I'm going to say TS11. I'm saying B001. Click on go. Let's issue the book. Let's give a back date. So it is 22nd today, but I'm giving 15 December. And let's say the due date was 20 December. Okay. Let's issue this book. Right now it is possible because we've not added validations. But technically this due date is past, right? Today is 22nd and due date was 20. So this entire record should have been read. But we still have to write some code for this. So how do we go about this? So just go to your front end, click on grid view. In the events, there is a row data bound event which you have to fire. So in the data, you can see this row data bound event. So this event basically fires after a row has been data bound or connected to the database, or you've got the data. So this is, just double click on it and this event is created for you. So inside this, you have to make a check. So I'm going to write some code and I'll explain to you what it is. So this row data bound will fire every time for every row. And inside this, we are using try catch. And what we are saying is if e.row.row type is data control row, which is basically just checking if it is a proper row which is having some values. So in that case, what we say is we say date time dt and convert to date time e.row.cellFi. Now, which is the fifth cell in this row? So if you start from 0 and if you see this grid view, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So the fifth cell is basically the due date. So in the code, what we are doing is we are taking this due date, we are converting it to date time object. We are taking today's time. So we are taking today's date. And now we are checking if today is greater than this date. So is today's date greater than this date? If it is greater, then what we are saying is we want this entire row to be colored red. and this color can be anything over here. You can specify these different colors. Right now I've set pale, violet, red, and in the else nothing is happening. So we are just making a check if this date is smaller than today's date. If it is smaller, that is if today's date is greater than whatever date we are picking it from the due date, it means that the due date has passed, so this row has to be red. Okay, this gridview row data bound event is fired for every row, and inside that every row we want to make a check with due date and current date. So current date is 22nd. We want to check if 22nd is greater than this due date. If it is greater, then this has to be red, which means that this guy is in defaulters list. That is, he's not yet returned the book. So if I save this and if I refresh the code, I'm guessing this should become red. Yeah, there you go. This member has now become red. Let's add another member. Let's go to member management. Do we have other members? Yeah, we have SA12. Let's go to admin login, TS11123. Go to the book issuing. Let's say SA12 needs a book of B002. Click on go. The member name and book name comes. Let's issue this book 22nd, which is today's date, to 29. Now if I issue this book issued successfully, you can see this row is not red because the due date is 29 and today's date is 22nd. So there is still time for Sachin to return this book, and that's why this entry is not become red. So remember, when you want to check in the row of a grid view, you have to use this grid view row data bound event. If you just go to the grid view, select the grid view in this event section, we fired this row data bound. If you double click on it, this is that event. So in the try catch, we are checking every row. We are checking the 5th cell because the 5th cell has the due date. We are converting it to the date object, and we are again taking today's date using this code datetime.today, and now we are checking if today is greater than dt. It means that the due date has passed and that row has to be red. Okay, now you can do different colors, you can do different styling also. You can add styling to this row and you can Google out some code. Even I got this on Stack Overflow. So yeah, full disclosure, a lot of code you can find online. You just have to do a proper Google search. And this pretty much concludes our entire book issuing module. We did the go button, we did the issue and return button. And now if you view the books, B001 and B002 both have one less in the available stock, but the actual stock is going to be the same. And when you return these books, those stock will be reinstated. So yeah, this is the book issuing module. I know this was a little lengthy, but I hope you've understood how you can create this entire e-library module, that is book issuing module. So that's it for this video, guys. In the next video, we'll take a look at the user module, and we are pretty much coming to the end of this entire course. If you've been following so far, if you watched this entire course, I would highly appreciate if you give this video a like, do share it with your friends, definitely subscribe to this channel for more technology oriented video tutorials, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.